Okay. Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call to order Senate Committee on Revenue. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Kieckeffer.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Gansert. Chair Neal.
Here. So just really quick, if we have new listeners tuning in, there are 4 ways to participate in committee. Register to participate in the committee meeting through the system on Nellis, which places you on the line to testify. You go and click participate, you'll get a call-in number. Then you identify whether or not you're going to be in support, opposition, or neutral. You can also submit written testimony to the committee's email address or fax number listed on the agenda. You can share your opinion via the legislature's opinion application, or you can just simply view the committee through Nellis or on the legislator's YouTube channel. We have 2 bills on work session today, and 278 and SB 284. So I will go ahead and turn the meeting over to Mr. Reel, who will go through the work session documents.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Joe Reel, Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. Committee, the work session documents are available in Nellis. And the first bill on work session today is Senate Bill 278. This bill revises provisions relating to the taxation of cannabis, sponsored by Senator Settlemyre, heard in this committee on March 23rd. Senate Bill 278 provides that the 15% wholesale marijuana excise tax, which is imposed on medical and adult use cannabis cultivation facilities pursuant to NRS 372A.290, does not apply to any transfer of cannabis by these facilities to another cannabis cultivation facility if the cannabis cultivation facility to which the cannabis is transferred is an affiliate of the cannabis cultivation facility transferring cannabis. The bill defines affiliate as a person who directly or indirectly owns or controls, or is owned or controlled by, or is under common ownership or control with another person. For purposes of this section, control shall be presumed to exist if any person directly or indirectly owns, controls, holds with the power to vote, or holds proxies representing 50% or more of the voting interests of any other person. The work session document summarizes the individual that testified on the measure. There is an amendment that was submitted by Senator Settlemyre following the hearing on the bill. It's proposed amendment 3159. It's attached to the work session document. The amendment basically eliminates the amendments that were made to 372A.290 in section 1. And basically then the amendment reinstates existing provisions of 372A.290 that requires a 15% wholesale tax to be imposed on each wholesale sale of cannabis. And then on page 2 of the work session document, the amendment adds a new paragraph G to subsection 8 to provide a definition for wholesale sale to mean a sale or transfer of cannabis by a cannabis cultivation facility to another cannabis cultivation facility or another cannabis cultivation establishment. The term does not include a transfer of cannabis by a cannabis cultivation facility to another cannabis cultivation facility when both cannabis cultivation facilities share identical ownership. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, I think you're on mute.
Oh. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Senator Kieckeffer.
Thank you on the amendment. So in the new language, Mr. Reel, in paragraph G, what about a scenario where there might be a transfer between a cannabis cultivation facility where there's not identical ownership? Would that then be considered a wholesale sale?
Yes, Senator, that's my interpretation, that if they're not under identical ownership, then it would be treated as an actual sale, and then the tax would be imposed.
And then if there's a subsequent, when there's a subsequent transfer out of the second cultivation facility up to a dispensary, would that still be, would that be taxed at wholesale again?
Well, I guess if the first transfer between the identical ownership occurs.
No, I'm suggesting that if there's a transfer between cultivation facilities that do not have identical ownership, so that would be wholesale transfers where it's taxed at 15%. And then that secondary cultivation facility transfers it up to a dispensary. Is that secondary transfer also a wholesale transfer, wholesale sale?
Madam Chair, this is Russell Ginden with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I think that's a good question by Senator Kiekeffer, and it would be my interpretation as your LCB staff that the existing interpretation and administration of law for that event would be that the whole 15% wholesale tax would be on that first transfer. So when the person is transferring it, say, from cultivation facility 1 to cultivation facility 2, and they're not affiliated, and then cultivation facility 2 would transfer it. I get, as my understanding from the hearing on this bill and then looking at the law, that it wouldn't be, but I believe we do have representatives from the Department of Taxation, Madam Chair, and it may be best to have them address Senator Kiekeffer's question.
Okay. Department of Tax.
Thank you, Melanie Young, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. To Senator Kiekeffer's question on the transfer after from the cultivation facility to the next facility, such as a production or retail, it would not be taxed at that. It's taxed on the first transfer. But the subsequent transfers are not taxed.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I have a question, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So following up on that line, I just want to make sure I understood that last answer. The subsequent transfers are not taxed, and that is our current state of law, not because of this bill. Is that correct?
Thank you, Melanie, Executive Director. Question to Senator Ratty. That is correct. So currently it is taxed only on the first transfer. What this bill does would allow a cultivation to cultivation transfer under same ownership to not be taxed.
And that ownership would have to be identical.
Yes.
But if there was a subsequent move, so what I want to make sure is that first move then doesn't get treated like all other moves or subsequent moves and therefore would not be taxed. Their first move to a non-identical owner would still be taxed.
Melanie Young, Executive Director, for the record, yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Chair. I would just note for the record, I'm leaning towards voting for this one, but with some reservations, just because I want to make sure that we just want a little bit more time to look at the language and make sure we got it right.
Okay. Thank you for that. Members, any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, I will accept a motion to amend and do pass.
I would make that motion to amend and do pass.
Okay, Senator Dennis.
Second.
Do you have a second? Senator Kiekeffer, is that a second?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Well, Secretary, please take the roll call.
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Senator Ratty,
Yes.
Senator Kiekeffer,
Yes.
Senator Severs-Gansert,
Yes.
Chair Neal.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. So if and when this, bill moves, because it may get siphoned, but Senator Settlemeyer, I would give that floor statement to him. Okay, Mr. Reel, the next bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Joe Reel, Deputy Fiscal Analyst, the Fiscal Analysis Division. The next bill on work session is Senate Bill 284. This bill revises provisions relating to the transferable tax credits for affordable housing, sponsored by Senator Ratty, and heard in this committee on March 30th. Senate Bill 284 revises various provisions governing the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program, established pursuant to Senate Bill 448 of the 2019 legislative session as a 4-year pilot program and administered by the Housing Division of the Department of Business and Industry. Specifically, Senate Bill 284 revises the procedure for the issuance of transferable tax credits so that the transferable tax credits are issued before rather than after the project is completed. It authorizes an entity to which a project sponsor transfers transferable tax credits to transfer those tax credits to an affiliate or subsidiary. It requires the entity to notify the Housing Division of such a transfer. That provision will be part of an amendment that we'll discuss shortly. The bill also removes the 4-year sunset provisions originally established for Senate Bill 448 from the 2019 session, making the program permanent. And then the bill also clarifies that the maximum amount of tax credits that may be issued under the program remains at the $40 million as established from Senate Bill 448 from the 2019 session. Again, the work session document summarizes the individuals that testified. There is an amendment that was discussed by Senator Ratty during the hearing on the bill. And so you'll see on the page 2 of the work session document that we're amending section 1, subsection 6B3. And we're just adding the phrase or more such that with regard to transferring the tax credits, an entity to which a project sponsor transfers any transferable tax credits may transfer those transferable tax credits to one or more of its subsidiaries or affiliates, and then shall notify the department upon making that transfer. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, members, any questions on 284? Okay, seeing none, I will, can I get a motion to amend and do pass?
Sure. I make a motion to amend and do pass. Senator Dennis.
Okay, Senator Dennis, can I get a second? So I will second the motion to amend and do pass. Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Senator Ratty,
Yes.
Senator Kiekefer,
Yes.
Senator Severs Gansert,
Yes.
Chair Neal.
Yes. Senator Ratty, I will assign that floor statement to you.
Thank you.
Really love that. Okay, so that closes our work session. We will now move into our agenda. We are going to take the bills we're going to do SB 346 first, and then SB 367, and then SB 389. So I will you will open the hearing, Vice Chair Ratty, because all these bills are under me.
Do I have to? No. All right. Well, once again, got my hands on the Revenue and Economic Development Committee, which always makes me happy. We are through the work session and moving on to doing the bills. Let me just check in with the sponsor. In order, makes sense? Do you have all the presenters that you need?
Yes, I believe the only other person that was going to be on, and I don't see him for SB 346, was Brian Wachter. Oh, are you on? Oh, I see you. Okay. I had to scroll the camera. All right. And Mr. Gendon will be presenting tables that he created. So that's it.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we have everybody that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the hearing on Senate Bill 346 and invite Chair Neal to the virtual dais.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to be probably the most unorthodox introduction to digital goods ever. So SB 346 does a couple of things. The bill is trying to deal with tax erosion that's happened at our base, and it's broadening our tax base, and it's touching on digital goods that have transformed out of our base. So I'm going to walk you guys through memory lane really quick. So remember the days where you used to buy albums and you might have gone to Tower Records? You're probably wondering, how in the world did she find an Elvis Christmas album? Well, thanks to my aunt who had one in her closet, I was just like, I shall take this back to Carson City. Thank you. And then for all of my very senior members who have been around, Perry Como and his awesomeness doing his Christmas album of the century, and how we don't get our music this way anymore. And to top the charts, I went and found me a little bit of Nat King Cole. So the albums of the century. So when we think about how we've grown, right? We remember when we would go get our TDK tapes because we wanted to capture our lives and make music for our friends. Or we would go get, well, this was Maxwell and this is our TDK. And you would go and say, I'm going to make my friend a tape, and you would make them a little mixtape and you would write on the label. We don't do this anymore. You don't go and buy a cassette which was printed and paid for. You download. We no longer go to the store and get our VHSs, which is the awesome Jungle Book from 1965, which was the best movie ever. We also don't go and get our little baby geniuses, which when we had our small little children, we stuck them in front of the VCR and said, hey, let's watch Baby Geniuses and see how you can learn today. We don't do that anymore. We also don't go get the companion good, where we would then go buy that VHS tape, stick it in our double recorder, and then actually make a copy of one of our VHS. We have completely moved on. And these goods are no longer in our tax base. Everybody remember the Wii? Remember when we used to say, oh my goodness, I'm going to pull out that little whiteboard and I'm going to do my thing in front of the TV? Well, now you have the mirror. Yeah? So we have moved ahead, and it's time that the state of Nevada moved with us. Remember the old PlayStation 2? That is now a classic. You can't even use it on your little Sony device anymore. You have to have a PS5 in order to play anything. And it does not take in some of your older games. So why did I do this show and tell? Oh, and I did the show and tell because the durable goods that used to go with our wonderful music, such as the player here, you're like, why does she have a Walkman? Well, I still own one because of the awesomeness of it, and I still have cassette tapes. But when we talk about tax erosion and we talk about what is no longer in our tax base, these are some of the goods that are no longer in our tax base because they've transformed. They've become digital. They have become something else. We now download. We download everything. We download our books. And if you think about Hunger Games, I think this movie is only maybe about 6 or 7 years old. But now we don't go to the store to go figure out if we're going to do a hard copy or a soft copy. What we do is go to our Kindle and we download. And so all of those things have had an effect on our tax base. They've had an effect because the durable good and the hard, tangible good that was a part of our sales tax base has eroded out of the base. And so SB 346 tries to recapture that, but also walk us into the future of how we are now getting our audio, visual, our books, our games, because everything is via an app. And so I wanted to share that with you guys just so I could walk us back down memory lane, put it into context about what is a tangible good and then what's a digital good, and why is 346 an important measure that is dealing with the issue of tax erosion. And so I want to share some data before we get into the bill. I want to share some information that our Russell Gendon has on what is happening in the space, because he kind of went in and tried to find out who are payers in this system and what kind of revenue are we talking about when we talk about digital goods and the tangible goods space. And so I'm going to transfer over to Mr. Gendon, and then Mr. Wachter, what we needed was information on what is the consumption rate that is going on with these digital goods to understand whether or not this policy truly will broaden our tax base, which is the second goal of the bill, and then help us understand why this bill may be a much needed policy to modernize our revenue for the state and our tax statutes for the state. So, Mr. Gendon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Russell Gendon, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. And so there should be one chart and 3 tables that are in Nellis available to you. And so what I will do is attempt to share my screen here and bring up a chart that was put together. So hopefully you can see the chart, and just let me slide some of the Zoom windows so I can see the chart. So what you should be seeing on your screen, or again, you have the exhibits in Ellis, that this is taking data that's published by the Bureau of Economic Analysis of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And so this is what they call U.S. personal consumption expenditures. So this would be consumer spending. And they do this by some fairly detailed categories. And they actually put the information out quarterly at the U.S. level. And so what you see here is for the level of detail that I can get at that would have bearing on sort of the SB 346 issue. And also, I think, helps demonstrate sort of what Senator Neal was discussing as she went through memory lane there. So the solid blue line here, and the titles that you see at the bottom are the Bureau of Economic Analysis titles. So just to give a little bit of overview, the BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, for these personal consumption expenditures, they break what we consume into goods and services, and then within goods, they break it into durable and non-durable. So, right, this tangible personal property that our sales tax would currently be subject to would be in this durable category. So the solid blue line is durable goods for audio and video recording media. So those would be a lot of the things that the chair was presenting to you. But so you can see how it was peaked up here in the level that you see in the early or first half of 2000 decade to where it is now. And then you can see the short dash line here. That is actually the video component. And the longer dash line is the audio component. And you will notice that in the title that they're including at their level of reporting what they call permanent downloads, permanent digital downloads. So that would not be in our current sales tax base, but they're recording it as a durable because their view is you're recording it and permanently retaining it on, say, a storage media. So they're deciding to put it there. And so I would argue this short dash line that you see coming up here, part of that is probably because of the digital downloads, not because of the tangible construct and so then you see the solid green line shooting up here starting in 2013, 2014. That is, they categorize it as a service, but would be your audio, visual audio video streaming and rental component, where again, the long dash line is the audio component and the short dash line is the video component. So I think this is the personal consumption expenditures that the U.S. Put out for the U.S. level, sort of demonstrates statistically what Senator Neal was stating. I don't have this at the Nevada level. They just don't at the state report it at the same level of detail. But this would be the U.S. level. So, Madam Chair, did you want me to continue with the other tables or just stop with this chart and then to go through?
I'm going to ask the sponsor.
Oh, sorry, Senator Neal. I forget who's got the gavel, so I apologize. So,
That's okay.
So Senator Neal, do you want me to proceed through and just quickly go through the other three tables?
Yeah, really
Okay.
quickly.
Thank you. So, sorry,
Please go ahead.
I'm trying to find the right table. Sorry. So, okay. So what you should also have available to you is Table 1. And so what Table 1 does is it's going to take the U.S. personal consumption expenditures and interpolate them into what it would mean in Nevada on a per capita basis, just to try and create a reference point. And this is what staff was trying to do in terms of get their mind around what was going on at the U.S. level, what it might imply for a potential tax base for Nevada for the audio video streaming, knowing that that's not inclusive of the other types of digital products that would be included under SB 346. So in Table 1A at the top, that's really just the data that you saw displayed in the chart. So the personal consumption, and I just added cable and satellite, which is the other part that's in play.
Mr. Gindin, can you make that bigger? I'm old.
Sure. Sorry. So that's just the data that's in the chart at the U.S. level. And then I put down here in Table 1B to just show you the video audio and then the video audio broken out. Those components is a share of cable and satellite. So you can see how video and audio streaming was around 18% of cable and satellite in 2015, and then was around 41% 5 years later in calendar year 2020. So then, as I said, what I've done down is we take and calculate what it was on a U.S. per capita basis, and we're going to use that to interpolate what it might imply for Nevada on a per capita basis. So you see that that tax base or what the consumption expenditures would be for Nevada on the per capita in Table 1C. So you can see that would imply that it's somewhere around $362 million here in calendar year 2020, taking the U.S. data and interpolating it into Nevada on a per capita basis. And then you can see the breakout between video and audio listed below there. And so then just to provide a reference point, because I think sometimes people can lose context that when you have say hundreds of millions of dollar tax base, what it would yield for the state general fund at the 2% rate. And so that's what Table 1D does, is show you then that $362 million would yield approximately $7.2 million in 2% sales tax collections for the state general fund, if that was indeed the tax base from the audio video streaming component. And then just Table 1E and 1F are just showing you the data that was being used to do in terms of population in the U.S. per capita. And so you can see down there at the very bottom that the U.S. data, that the video and audio streaming is approximately $115 per person, with 79 coming from video and 36 from audio. So that was the starting point for the data that the fiscal staff had available to look at this as what it may mean as the potential tax base that's out there. And sorry. There we go. Sorry, all of a sudden my computer is getting a little less than accommodating here. So what this table does is tries to walk through what the fiscal division staff would think the potential tax base could be using the information that was presented as well as other information we've attempted to obtain through Google research and/or we made the request for the commerce tax database by taxpayer, again, under the provisions of NRS 218F.620, to try and get that data to look at what some of the tax base may be. And so all that data then was utilized in trying to produce what we believe would be a reasonable estimate for the potential tax base for digital products. So in table 2, that's walking through that what we think the tax base would be and what would be the implication for tax collections for the various rates, and then the state general fund impact. So in table 2A, that would be the actual taxable sales here statewide in FY 2020, and this would be the imputed taxable sales given the economic forum's December 2020 forecast for the state 2% tax collections. So in section 2 of table 2A, you see the taxable sales for digital products. We believe that the digital products tax base is around the $394 million had it been in place in FY 2020. Again, using the data that's available from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, looking at the data that the actual taxpayers reported for FY 2020 under the commerce tax, as well as then looking at other information that we were able to utilized in producing this estimate. And then we're just sort of letting it grow out by a demographic and inflationary factor to get the estimates for FY 22 and FY 23 for the next biennium if it was in place.
So Mr. Gendon, before you go further, can you explain like what is all included in this number? Because we don't have the full tax base of digital goods because of this is, the method in which you were able to derive this number. I want you to just kind of explain like what's in that base, and then what we think probably would be in the expanded base once we know who's in as far as payers if the bill passes.
Well, that's a good question, and so clearly we know the audio streaming is in there. So then. And so we could use the personal consumption expenditure at the U.S. and the interpolation to try and give us some gauge of what the potential tax base could mean. But again, we're also able to go into the commerce tax and see and find those entities that we know are providing the digital product. And I just have to be careful here that I have to maintain the confidentiality of that information. So I don't want to get into naming the actual taxpayers and stuff like that we're able to find. But I think you can realize who's out there. And then what we did is tried to go through and look at some of those that we may not be able to find in the commerce tax base, but knew that might be in there. And so, but principally, we're looking at those streaming services and you can see they're almost popping up daily, like the Paramount Plus, the Disney Plus, the Discovery Plus, Netflix, Hulu, Sling, Roku. Those things where you're paying for the right to be able to consume a digital product. But we know there may be others that are out there that we don't have data on, such as the senator mentioned, the mirror. And then clearly, this is a very dynamic, I think, growing product line. So there could be things that we are out there that we're not aware of or could crop up. So that's sort of what was staff's logic in trying to think through this and seeing what data that we could find. So it's a little bit of using the BEA data, actual data from the FY 2020 commerce tax reported by businesses that would be in this, and then trying to look at information. In fact, there's a website called Statista.com, and it's actually a sort of an interesting website that they do a lot of surveys. And so they have surveys where they've tried to do like how many people have Netflix, how many people have Hulu, what they might be paying on average per month. And so all that kind of data was used to the best that we could think of those things that would be included in the tax base. So with that, then, Table 2B of Table 2, that takes that our estimated tax base for digital products and shows you what the estimated yield would be for each of the tax rate components: the state general fund 2%, the LSST 2.6%, the BCC and FCCRT, which is the portion, the 2.25% rate that goes to local governments. And then we did not attempt to do estimates by county. It's going to be a difficult exercise to do it, I think, statewide. So what we did is what would be a taxable sales weighted statewide average sales tax rate using the FY 2019 taxable sales, not the FY 2020 because of the pandemic effect. So that would imply a statewide weighted average tax rate of approximately 2.224%. So then you can see what would be the implied yield from that 1.374 weighted average all other rates. And so you can see then it would be somewhere around $8.4 to $8.6 million for the 2% in FY22 and FY23, and then around $11 million for the LSST, and then you can see the amounts for the other rates. So in Table 2C, I just, again, to help people be able to process how it works from the state's perspective, is we get the state 2% collections. And so I just put the economic forum's current forecast there as the reference point. And then Section 2 of Table 2C, here's the 2%, but we also get the general fund commissions off of those other rates. So we're going to pick up a few $100,000 off of the commissions. And so Section 3 shows you the total amount of the impact for the general fund there from the digital goods in terms of adding the digital products estimate from Section 2 to the economic forum's current estimate for Section 1. And so that's the potential base. And then I think finally what I just wanted to do is your staff was trying to think through this.
I'm just going to interrupt you. For those who are trying to follow along, would you just say that number out loud? It's a little bit hard to see. And I think.
Okay, so I apologize. So the estimated total general fund revenue impact from the 2% rate plus the general fund commissions would be approximately $8.7 million for FY 2022 and basically $9 million for FY23. So that would be the 2% rate plus the commissions off the other rates.
So, Mr. Gindin, can you explain where did you get the $400 million impact that you believe?
Well, as I tried to explain, is that staff trying to use the BEA data that's available, that they're reporting at the U.S. level, and then interpolating that in, plus using the commerce tax by taxpayer to see what they reported for FY 2020, but also could go back and look at FY 19, and using that information, and then also going to the websites like Statista, and just trying to look at other states to get whatever information we could to try and capture what we thought would be included in this base. Now, realizing we may be missing some things in that analysis. So can you just make it clear? Because a lot of people are not tax people. So so do we have games in the base? No, I can't tell you that we explicitly can plan at a number of that estimate as games. Is it in our consideration when we're trying to do the analysis? Yes, because we have a certain amount of data, and then your fiscal staff had to start to try and make some guesstimates of what might be representative of the other stuff that we didn't have data on that would be included in there, such as digital games. And again, right, because of the newness of some of these streaming products, they're possibly not even in the fiscal year 2020 tax base as a streaming product. So there we had to also extrapolate out what we thought might be in the tax base. Okay. So then finally, what I did is to try and provide perspective, and this is going to be the hard table, but I'll try and blow it up here. So this takes the taxable sales for FY 2020 and FY 2019 statewide and takes them by the actual business categories that the Department of Taxation reports, that level of detail at the 3-digit NAICS code, and then it ranks them by FY 2020 from largest to smallest. So that's what you see here is the left-hand column is the ranking. Here's the business category, and then here's the amounts. So you can just look at some of these and see the order of magnitude of them, that they're in the billions of dollars. So your first 15 categories are $1 billion or more. Then you get below the $1 billion.
Mr. Ginden, you're not sharing. We can't see it.
It's not sharing. Whoops, sorry. It didn't hook up. I apologize. Now did it hook up?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you for letting me know. I clicked on it, but it clearly didn't hook up. So I apologize. So this is the table again, as I stated, that it takes the taxable sales actual reported by the Department of Taxation for FY 2019 fiscal years. And then it takes these are the 3-digit detailed categories that taxation reports, except for the dark shaded gray one that I'll get to here. And then it ranks them by their FY 20 from largest to smallest. So as you can see here, the first 15 are $1 billion or more, and clearly you can see some of the big ones. And then as you get down here, then the ones that are below $1 billion. So if the $394 million that we're estimating could be the potential tax base for had it been in place in FY 2020, based on the information from census, based on the information from looking at the commerce tax by taxpayer, and then your tax team staff making an estimate for the other stuff that we think could be occurring. So this provides you a reference point of where the $394 million would sit in the taxable sales. So it would have been around in the top third, because there's 98 categories here. So at 28, right, it'd be almost in the top third. And so then there's possibly people go, well, couldn't the tax base be larger than $394 million? And I'll have to be honest as your staff to say, yes, it could be. But this is your staff's estimate, given the data that we have available to us and trying to work through it. But I think one of the things is your staff was working through this to try and keep in mind when you're doing the analysis is that when you look up at some of the other products and try to get a relative bearing on the potential, the estimate for the potential digital goods product tax base compared to some of the other categories, if you let yourself think about it, if you have a family of 4 and they need one connection for Netflix or Hulu to stream that product, most likely, right? Versus for some of these other categories, if you're going to take that family of 4 out to eat and, right, you could well spend over, right, $100 or $150. Well, Disney Plus allows you to stream Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus for, I believe it's $14 a month. So if you think about something, if you're spending, say, $150, that's 10 months worth of your streaming service. So, and me being a golfer, I go buy one golf club, that would probably pay for a year's worth of streaming at $14 a month. So I think that's when we looked at it as your staff to go, well, should it be up there around sporting goods that's $800 million or some of these others? Well, I don't think our error is that big. Could it be bigger than 394? Possibly. But this is where we settled as your staff. And then thinking through that the other types of things that people consume as a household in terms of needing one access for a stream versus a household of 4, and especially if you think about you're buying clothes, right? I don't think people can stream one shirt amongst 4 people, but they can stream one access to the digital products. So the consumption nature of this can be different than for other types of products that people consume, to which we impose the sales tax. So that was the intent of this table, is to try and get perspective of what this base would look like in relation to our current taxable items.
Thank you, Mr. Ginden. I just want to note for the public, if you're struggling to follow along on the screen, these documents are all on Nellis. They would be listed as exhibits on today's agenda, and they would be chart 1 and tables 1, 2, and 3. So if you're trying to keep up with us and all these numbers, that's where you would find them. Senator Neal?
Thank you, Vice Chair Ratty. So, Mr. Gindin, to simplify this, because I know what you're saying, I think I've spent like 8 years knowing what you're saying. But so the expected base is 394 million that we can, based on the limited data that we have, because it's my understanding, based on that number, this is an estimate, but we do not have all of the data. Unless this bill passes, then we would know what the true impact is, right? But 394 is what we would, if the bill passed, using commerce tax information on who are existing payers, that is the number that we would get for the state.
Yes, that's had it been in place in FY 2020, and then you can see it's larger as we grow it out based on our assumptions for FY 22 and FY 23. And I would agree that in terms of ranking them, the best data that your staff had was the commerce tax data, because that's actual data reported by taxpayers for July 1st through June 20th fiscal year period. So that's probably our best data that we had, because since we're not currently taxing it under this excise tax construct, we don't have any actual data for Nevada. So the commerce tax was that best close proxy for it. And then looking at the BEA data from the US and what's going on in the streaming categories, and then doing the web searching of what other data might be available out there to help guide us on the types of products that would be out there and or any data. So that would be the information set rank from best moving down to less than best, and how it was utilized to generate the estimate of the approximately $394 million as the base that had it been in place in FY 2020 versus the estimates for if this was approved in our estimates. And I would say this is somewhat still a work in progress, because we're thinking about it. And obviously now that it's out in the public, other people may have information to provide your staff for consideration. But thus, we think it could be, our estimate is $419 million for FY 2022 would be the potential digital products tax base, and $431 million for FY 23 are the current estimates by your fiscal analysis division using the information available.
Thank you, Mr. Gindin. And we'll note it would be the same as any new tax that we would be doing, that really until you can make your projections, but until you have your actuals, you're not really going to know. All right, so Senator Neal.
Thank you. I just wanted to try to simplify it. I respect Mr. Gindin, but I just want to simplify it for our listeners so that they understand what the numbers are, because sometimes the charts, they're really hard to see even when you're just sitting in front of the computer and you're not able to actually see unless you have like readers on. But I will let Mr. Wachter go and talk about consumption, and then I'll do a high level on the bill.
Okay, Mr. Wachter.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ratty and Senator Neal. Brian Wachter, for the record, with the Retail Association of Nevada. I just want to thank Senator Neal for working on this. This has been a work in progress for, I think, 6 years now in the making, and this is something that we appreciate her bringing the stakeholders together to arrive at the version of Senate Bill 346 that you have. I'm going to get into the consumption patterns, but I really, after we've had an overview of Mr. Gindin and what we could bring in, really want to touch on the reason behind the tax and what we're trying to do here. And the Nevada's current sales tax law does not treat consumers equally when they purchase the same product in different formats. And this disadvantages customers of physical goods relative to the buyers of digital goods. And this asymmetry also adds to the regressivity of the current sales tax. as the average income of households with internet access is greater than the average of households without internet access, making it very difficult, if not impossible, for the latter to purchase digital goods. Moreover, among households with internet access, those who buy online tend to have higher than average incomes. And similarly, there are also unequal tax treatment among businesses that sell media goods. The vendors of physical books, music, and movies are required to charge the tax, while vendors that specialize in digital goods are not, even when both are selling the exact same content. Despite the complex tax treatment of digital products, it's undeniable that the digital economy continues to encompass a larger share of economic activity. More consumers are streaming or downloading digital products as opposed to purchasing them through tangible means. In 2019 alone, more than 10 states expanded, considered, or proposed digital product taxes. Even in states that don't impose a sales tax on digital products, there are other assessments. For example, Florida generally does not levy a sales tax on digital products, but it imposes an almost 8% communication services tax on video and streaming services. Chicago also imposes a personal property lease transaction tax on cloud computing services at 9%. So why does Nevada need this? Well, according to a recent study entitled The Global Rise of Digital Goods and Services, nearly 3/4 of online purchases are digital products or digital goods and services. Currently, 42% of all state and local tax revenue in Nevada is derived from the sales and use tax base. The digital economy makes up 9% of the GDP, or $1.8 trillion. And Nevada's made great strides in updating our current Sales and Use Tax Act. As you know, it was originally designed in 1955. It's older than the previous education funding formula that was recently changed last session. And so that's what funds the state, is a 1955 Sales and Use Tax law. SB 346 strengthens our tax foundation. It ends the erosion of our tax base that Senator Neal outlined, and it brings parity between customers and vendors. To give you an example, DVD sales reached $16.3 billion in 2005. These days, DVD sales account for less than 10% of the total market, with sales only hitting $2.2 billion in 2018. Blu-ray discs, which have always been slightly more expensive than DVDs, launched in 2006, and Blu-ray sales reached $2.37 billion in 2013 before falling to $1.8 billion in 2018. It's likely that Blu-ray sales fractionally impacted DVD sales, but the fact that DVD sales still outpace Blu-ray sales shows that that is not the case. What we have is a hyper-adaptation, I think is the word we're going to use, is hyper-adaptation of digital services, especially due to COVID and natural evolution into the market. We could see a lot of this happen during the recession in 2010. Disposable income for Americans bottomed out. It shattered, and no one had disposable income. And so over the last decade, as income has been able to grow, people have been changing their consumer habits. Once you go digital, you don't go back. And so as more and more folks are onto these platforms and changing their consumer behavior, these are evolutions that are going to be permanent. COVID required, out of necessity, for that hyper-adaptation to take place very quickly. People were forced to stay in their homes. They couldn't access our retailers. They were certainly at a very low capacity for those that even were open the entire time. And so folks moved over to that digital space, and that has skyrocketed the amount that we have seen. For instance, selling subscription online is nothing new. We've been doing that, and the market's been doing that since the late 90s. I think we all remember signing up for an antivirus software subscription, where it would just update your antivirus every so often. Those were subscription-based, and that was something that we have from the late 90s. But now that subscription business model has gone mainstream, digital products are packaged and sold as online services, accessed via subscriptions. These subscriptions and these companies are building strong long-term relationships with their customers. And so we've actually seen, based on a survey, that same survey I referenced, in the United States, about 0.95% of all Americans have a video subscription service. About half of Americans have a music subscription service. About 1 in 4 Americans access an audio book subscription, and 1 in 5 Americans pay for paid podcasts, all of which would be included under SB 346. And another area that we could look at as well is the gaming market. Not thinking of casino gaming, but actual video gaming. This market has radically transformed in the last 2 decades. Technology advancements like mobility, cloud, AI are really starting to change consumer trends. And we're seeing that companies and consumers are willing to experiment in this regard in what they're doing. In fact, when we look at the gaming sector, 45% of those in Generation Z had purchased a game in the last 12 months. 51% of millennials had made a purchase in the last year, while 14% of those in the boomer generation and 36% of Generation X had bought a video game in the last year. In the United States, on average, we each buy 7.38 mobile games every year. We purchase and download 5.8 console games, and we purchase and download 4.7 computer games last year as Americans. That gaming revenue is heavily split between downloads and in-game purchases. And so this is why Senator Neal will go through. There's a part of the bill that attempts to outline and clarify exactly what we're getting at. From a business standpoint, that erosion in our sales tax base has had huge repercussions as our local governments are struggling to be able to get the revenue that they need to provide services. They often look at increasing fees and licensing requirements to businesses in their jurisdictions. We're worried that as this trend continues, that erosion is going to cause further insecurity in our local government sales tax bases, which will further increase the need to seek revenue in other areas. And lastly, I would say that, the LSST portion of the sales tax is the largest portion funding our school system, more than property tax or general fund contributions. For the Clark County School District, any dollar that we are losing for erosion in the tax base is a dollar that we're not able to then put into their classrooms, and a dollar that we have to make up either through the general fund or through additional tax increases. The reason that we think that increasing and broadening the base on the sales tax is the appropriate way to go is because we are not raising the rates. As you've seen, the SB 346 actually helps decrease the amount of regressivity that we currently have in our sales tax and sets Nevada up for a more prosperous future. So with that, I thank you, Senator Ratty, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wachter. So I think we have some pretty good information about the bill. I'll turn it over back to the sponsor if you want to do a high-level walkthrough, but let's get it to the committee for questions.
Yeah, it's going to be super high level. I just want to note some amendments. So in section 118 through 138, that is actually deleted out of the bill. So there are no questions for those sections. Sections after 138, sections, I know I'm going in a weird order, but 139 through 149 just make conforming changes. And so I just wanted to note that. So if anybody had questions from sections 118 to 138, they're not there. Also in, and I'll get to section 21, but I'm just going to talk about the amendments really quick. So when you ask questions, you kind of know. So there's an amendment that was uploaded on Nellis. So in section 21, we spelled out what digital code was. There was conversation on public or private keys that may have been associated with blockchain, and making sure they weren't included. And the purpose behind that is because when you have the, blockchain in general, digital currency is not in because it's money. We don't tax money, right? So I just wanted to kind of spell that out. And then there is another amendment in section 21 where we had struck out language, but then we returned it back to say that cable operators and satellite companies are not digital goods providers, or they're not included in the digital good definition. And so with that, I will go back to the beginning and walk through the provisions really high level. So pretty much sections 1 through 13 define, give definitions of what we're doing, gross receipts, what's electronically transferred, end user, digital books, etc. Then sections 15 through 20 lay out, what's a definition of a retail sale, bringing in our existing sales tax statutes. And I want to make super clear, we mimic our exact sales tax statutes, but just moved and acting like an excise tax so we could pick up the digital goods. Section 17 defines what a ringtone is, 18 sales price, the seller. And then in section 21, this is to specify digital products and what the following types that are electronically transferred. So this includes audio works, audiovisual works, digital books, digital codes. So when you do digital codes, like nowadays, you get a digital code if you go to Redbox to download a movie. And so that code then acts as electronic transfer for media, which is then consumable, which is then seen as digital product. Section 22 gets into subscription and subscription arrangements. We had long conversations over the past couple of years about, digital goods is it's this bill that is kind of walking us into the future, because although that is a service, we have to touch the subscription because a service may be bundled with a good. And that is an important aspect of this bill, because although I talked about erosion of the tangible good into the digital format, this bill also puts a baby toe into services which has been a longstanding conversation in the legislature, because there is no way to extract it because of how the good is bundled. Section 24 just lays out how the excise tax is imposed. The way the excise tax will be imposed, it will literally be the exact sales tax rate in each county. So like in Carson City, the sales tax rate is 7.6%. This then acts as a seventh revenue that goes into the county under digital goods. So in Clark, where we have an 8.375%, they will then see a seventh revenue of 8.375 that goes into their county. Same thing for Washoe. Washoe has an 8.265%. If this bill was to pass, the excise tax on digital goods would be a seventh revenue that would go into the county. It goes into the first tier of the C-tax base as well. And so I just wanted to highlight those quick sections, and then you guys can just go ahead and let's start talking about the bill.
Okay. So there we have it. I'll open it up to the committee for questions. Who wants to start? I have a couple, but I'll defer to see if there's anybody else who likes to go first. Tell Senator Kieckhofer if that was a raised hand or if that was a go-ahead. It looks like a go-ahead. All right, so I just want to get the basic framework out on the, just make sure I understand it. So is it a sales tax, or are we creating something that looks exactly like a sales tax? And so, for example, you get out the county rates, right? If a county raises its sales tax rates, let's say we give them the authority to raise sales tax to support parks or something along those lines. If they raise the sales tax, will it also raise the digital goods tax? Or is it just frozen in time at their current rates?
So my understanding is the way it works, and I will let Russell get into that. It walks and acts like a sales tax. It's called an excise tax because of the 1955 Sales Tax Act, which limits our capacity. We've had several excise taxes that we've applied in the state of Nevada. This one, that's the best way I can say it. It will act like a sales tax rate. So if it's raised, we would need to mimic that. Digital goods would need to mimic, or else there would be some inequity. But I will let Mr. Gendon talk about that, because we did talk about that like a lot. But I want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly, because that was my understanding when we played with inequities of having a higher rate. We needed to make sure that the rate was exactly the same, because it can create legal issues if it was not the same. So if it grows, my understanding would have to grow with it. But Mr. Gendon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Russell Gendon, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst, the Fiscal Analysis Division. And so the answer to your question is yes, it is a new excise tax, so it'll be in its own new chapter in the NRS, but it has all the functional elements of our current sales tax. In fact, if you look at the bill explanation that was prepared and provided to you, we provided you there were section references to in NRS Chapter 372. So the vast bulk of this bill are the sections from NRS Chapter 362 that are in our sales tax to have those structural elements be part of this excise tax. And also, so then the definitions that Senator Neal referred to as the digital audio works, the digital audio visual works, the digital books, those are SUTA, Streamlined Sales and Use Tax definitions. So not only are we putting the structural elements of our sales tax in place, this is also being done in a way so that it's SUTA compliant in terms of picking up the sales tax elements and the provisions from Chapter 360B to have it be consistent with us being a streamlined sales and use tax full member state. And then so the specific part of your question about, yes, the provisions in the bill are that the current sales tax rates attached to the digital products, so that if the legislature would authorize or actually impose a new rate at the state or local level, or the local governments decide to utilize a rate that's also already been made optionally available to them, and they decide to implement that rate, it would attach to the digital products tax base in their county. So it has that ability to, as rates would come online, they would attach to the digital products, and then the proceeds would be distributed and be required to be used with the same authority for use as the sales tax rates.
Okay, so I think you answered what my next two questions were going to be there, which was, has SUTA weighed in on digital goods? And it sounds like, at least for the creating a structure and having definitions that they have, and so that this would be SUTA compliant. Is that correct?
Yes, I can answer that. I'm sorry. Senator Neal, for the record. Yes, so we have spent a great amount of time working with SUTA, getting advice from SUTA on exactly how to craft this bill. So when I had this bill in 2019 and it had a hearing on the assembly side, it was probably a blessing in disguise to get a chance to work on the bill for the next 2 years and to really codify SUTA rules and to build in protections, because we had a lot of conversations about making sure that we baked in SUTA rules into the bill so that 360, 372, that they literally were going to be able to speak to the SUTA rules. So if anybody came and said, you're out of SUTA compliance, we would be able to then say, no, we actually dragged in clear language that comports with what they told us to do to make sure that it was not out of compliance. And so we talked heavily with them. And I forgot to mention that because it was such a huge part of my life for 2 years. We had like 6 or 7 stakeholder meetings with stakeholders, and then with SUTA, and then with Department of Tax, just to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And also thank you for the timely remember to all of our legislative colleagues that sometimes it's a blessing in disguise when your bill dies. Probably a good timing for that reminder. So we're talking about, so then my final question, or at least for this round, is then it flows into CTAX.
Yes, it's my understanding it goes into the first tier. We had a conversation with local governments to try to explain what this bill did and how the digital goods would work and what they could understand to be the benefit of this policy. But I will let Russell Gendon get into the first tier of the CTAX.
Okay. Actually, I don't think we need more detail. It's in the bill. Yes. I think it's clear. I just, because it's a long bill and a complex hearing, I just want to make sure some things are on the record. So it ports with SUDA, it flows into the CTAX. While it is a separate tax, digital goods, it walks like, talks like, looks like sales tax and will function like sales tax, the way that folks are commonly referring to it in all other ways. I think that's important to get on the record. And then just to make sure, just circling back around to the estimate. So we think there's roughly, and we understand these are projections, $400 million worth of product out there. And that for the state rate, that would generate in the ballpark of 9 million, I think of what you said was 9 million first year, 10 million second year, but that would just be the state's portion. We are not even trying to give an estimate of what would flow through into CTAX and would benefit local governments. Is that correct? Am I understanding that information, Russell?
So, Russell, you can explain, but I think there's clarity. I think it's 400 million in actual revenue that we can see, and then the total amount of sales. But Russell, break that one down because the chart said a lot.
No, the Chair Ratty has it correct in terms of the tax base is in that $400+ million range. And so then estimated for FY22 and FY23, the general fund impact would be in that $9 to $10 million range in terms of the sales tax yield from that estimated potential $400 million tax base.
So the 400 million is not the tax, it's the value of the products that would be taxed.
To be consistent with how we would say it in the sales tax side, that would be the taxable sales to which the tax rate applies, and the retailer would collect the rates based on that taxable sales as they're selling the digital product.
Got it. Okay. And again, we're not trying to estimate what that would flow through to CTAX and go down to the local level.
No, what's shown on the table there is the amount statewide that would go to that rate, but there was no attempt or effort made by staff to try and estimate it by county, and thus what would flow down through the CTAX calculations.
Okay, so I'm sorry, and I was just getting familiar with the tables myself. So 9 million on the 2% rate to the state, or 10 million, but do we have a number? Did I just miss it? That would be the total amount going through to the CTAX to local governments?
Yes, and that would be in Table 2 in Section 2B of the table. That would be the BCCR/SCCRT, and that would be approximately in that $9.5 to $10 million range in FY22 and FY23, again, based on the estimated taxable sales. So that would be the statewide total amount that would be there that would be then distributed based on the county. And the intent would here is to have I believe, and that's one thing we can talk with the chair, is that we would situs it to the county in which the sale took place for the digital products tax rates for the BCCRT and SCCRT rates.
Okay, that's a great clarification. So that 9 and 10 million is not to the state, that is the statewide revenue generated from the rate based on that base of 400 million.
I think the number that I give you, the 9 to 10, that's the BCC and SCCRT. So the total amount that we would expect statewide to be generated from the digital products would be approximately 34 to 35 million. That would be all the rates statewide that are imposed. And then it would be that $8 to $9 million range for the state general fund. $10 to $11 million for the LSST that would go in the fund schools, and then that $9 to $10 million that would be distributed to the locals, and then it would be in the $5 to $6 million range, which would be going out to the counties based on the local option rates that are imposed. But I'm again not trying to estimate the back to county amounts. That would just be the statewide effect from those local option rates.
Now, that is a super helpful clarification, I think, with all the numbers being thrown around. So I apologize if I confused it, but I think laying it out. So new tax generates $35 million totally, broken down the way you just described. And so then again, if you could just briefly talk about the base. So in the base, you are estimating that 400 million to include everything that's listed in the bill. So I think it's section 21 that really goes through what's in. I'm understanding the bill correctly. And you're using the commerce tax as a starting point to come to that projection, because we really don't have detailed records on all of these product types that are listed in the bill.
Again, for the record, Russell Gannon with the Fiscal Analysis Division. That's correct, Madam Chair. That based on us looking at our law is similar to other states that have this type of tax on digital products. So trying to look at that and what may be included or excluded, and then what the state Senator Neal and her bill is including or excluded. The best that we could made estimates of what we thought that potential tax base could be in Nevada, and then produce the estimates been presented to you today. And then again, as we continue to work it, and if any other information would become available to us, then that could be incorporated into the analysis and or the estimates that your fiscal staff would produce.
Got it. And that makes sense that we would have the experience of other states with similar laws. Okay. I think those are my top level questions. Other members of the committee? Senator Keycupper?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly is happening with satellite TV providers. So I think we indicated that we're being ultimately stripped out of the bill through the amendments of deletions through 118 through 138, but then being added specifically to the definition of marketplace facilitator. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, I'll explain. So satellite was stripped out. So there's a whole, how can I explain this? So basically, I know that satellite is taxed in other states, and we were attempting to create tax parity between cable and satellite by bringing them in. That was our original intent. And so when we had a conversation with the local governments about, will you give up your local franchise fee so that we can create tax parity? I won't say all of the local governments said no, but a big county said no. And so the attempt was to, since the franchise fee, it's not a tax, but since cable was already paying the 5%, we knew that legally we could do a 5% satellite tax, which would then pick up the satellite companies. And of course, when the bill dropped out, nuclear war started, that this is not tax parity. So I stripped it out. So basically what we don't have is, we don't have tax parity between cable and satellite, which would totally expand our base and the revenue that we expect. And so what I asked them to do was, since if you have apps and if you grow, like if there are apps that are being paid on the website, this is the marketplace facilitator language. So if you have apps that are on, not the apps that are free, but apps where you are somehow, it's bundled into your service, that you would act as a marketplace facilitator and collect and remit the excise tax back to the state. And so that's the provision that I put in the bill for a couple of reasons. Number one, I believe Cox has one app that fits that scenario. satellite, they may have that in the future, and I wanted to make sure that I had a bill that reflected on activity that could occur in the future, being that they were not being brought under the digital goods application of this bill, and that any app that was walking through those doors, that we would collect it as well. Because here's what's happening in the digital space. It changes all of the time. The way goods are bundled, the way a provider may perform or act. And so I wanted to make sure that, as you know, in 2023, that we had language that dealt with how they may adapt their platform. Because if you've gone into Cox, I don't know if anybody's gone into Cox, I haven't, but you could literally go on and play games right now. Like, you could find an app, play games, other than just watching something other than what's on cable. You can go on and do other things. And so as I saw that growth, that's what I asked them for, and that's what I did. And that was the intent, and the reason why I did it is because of the future that I suspect will enable that to perform in a very different way.
From a tax parity perspective, let's talk about just like live TV. Would this create parity between like Hulu Live and satellite and a cable provider?
No. And the reason why it won't is because satellite and cable are not brought under this bill.
We don't pay sales tax on those services.
On Hulu?
On cable or satellite?
Currently, they are not, and I'll let Russell answer this, but it was my understanding they are not captured, or else we would have been able to make the argument that we're bringing them under the excise because we could mimic exactly where they fit into our state tax law. Cable has a franchise fee, but no. I know the simple answer is no, but I'll let Russell clarify that. It's my understanding we don't. I know states that do, and we were attempting to do that in the sections that I deleted.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Madam Chair, for the record, Russell Ginnan with the Fiscal Analysis Division. So Senator Neal has it correct, which was that your question that there is no sales tax on these types of things because they're not a tangible personal property construct. Right now, there is local governments have the statutory authority coming from the federal law that they can impose up to a 5% franchise fee tax on the gross receipts of cable operators and retain the proceeds for their use. But there's a federal prohibition against a local rate being placed on satellite companies. So that's, as Senator Neal stated, the bill as introduced was going to try and balance that by putting the 5% on satellite. So then you'd have 5% local on cable, 5% state on satellite. And then the sales tax rate would attach to the digital products. So then your question about the Hulu, cable, and satellite. So Hulu as a digital streaming would have the sales tax rate. And then as the bill is introduced, cable and satellite would have had 5%. A local 5% on cable, a 5% state. Now, under the proposed amendment, the 5% on cable is still in place through the franchise fee. The satellite will not have the tax on their services that you're paying. But then the digital streaming services will have the sales tax rate on them.
From an equivalency standpoint, it's like 3 different tax rates for the same service. If it's live TV. I'm not suggesting there's an easy way to fix it, so I get it. I had a couple just mechanical questions about the bill too that might be a little in the weeds, but if we look at section 40, subsection 2 at the bottom of page 11 of the bill, for example, says every business that purchases a specified digital product needs to register with the department. So the way I read that is that if you just have a Pandora subscription for your office music, that you'd have to file something with the department. I can imagine that's what it's intended to mean, but.
So So, no, and I think so in section 40 sub 2, this applies to a business, a retailer. So if this is my understanding, this was a retailer, not the individual person.
Right. I just think like if you have an office, if you're in an office environment and you have a subscription service for music, the way I would read that is that office business, that whatever business is in that office, be it a dentist's office, or whatever, you have to file some paperwork. Just trying to figure out.
So, yeah, I want to think through that. But our intent was, there will be some personal consumption there, but the way that we work this out is it would be the business who would then register with the department and give the name and address of all the agents and the location of their offices. And the way that we worked it out, because one of the biggest questions that we had was, what's the burden that we're creating in this scenario? And so when we worked with, and that's why I think that I know that we intended business, because our intent on the actual tax form itself, when we talked to SUDA to try to make sure there were no burden, we were going to be able to do this through the Department of Tax by adding one column and one row, so that, well, I won't say one row, but one column where we could insert digital goods and then insert that in. Because one of the largest conversations we had, other than definitions and who's in and who's out, was, okay, the real life scenario of what this tax form looks like. Are we changing this tax form? How do we change it? How do we bring individuals in? And that is what we talked about when we started to think about how many payers would we pick up in the system and then drag in, and then make sure that it wasn't burdensome to figure out who this was and how we would do it. And so I want to think through that section 40, if you're seeing that, and try to make sure that's a little bit cleaner.
Madam Chair, Senator Neal, if I may, as your staff, Senator Kieckeffer, section 40 is basically the digital counterpart to the tangible, which is NRS 372.220. And this is the use tax construct, not a sales tax construct. So in our sales, it's a sales and use tax. So if you see that it's saying if the product's for use in the state, and if every business that purchased for use in the state. So this is mirroring on the digital side for this new excise tax, the counterpart that we have for the use tax of tangible personal property that the Department of Taxation administers. So I just wanted to get that out, is that this is a section that mirrors the tangible use tax provisions that are in place and administered by the Department of Taxation with regards to businesses purchasing things for use, and then the tax rate can attach to that under the use tax, not under the sales tax provisions.
If they purchase it through a service that applies the sales tax at the point of purchase, or the excise tax at the point of purchase, then this provision wouldn't apply. It was applied under Section 24 and not Section 33.
Yeah, so this is the capture that if you buy things and you're going to use it, then in a sense, if it wasn't a retail transaction and the tax wasn't collected and your use, then you're the final consumer when you're using it, and thus the use tax kicks in to say that the tax is due because you're consuming it, that is, using it.
All right, that makes sense to me. Let's see. The language regarding nonprofit status, is that all what's currently mirrored in our sales tax law?
What section are you in?
You start at 50.
Madam Chair, again, it just made the easiest answer, and I apologize. It's just, that's a good question by the senator, but I think that the easy answer is then to possibly cover the Senator Kieckeffer's question as well as potential other forthcoming ones, is that all the exemptions that are in the tangible counterpart in Chapter 372 were carried forward into this new excise tax. Again, to mirror the two taxes in terms of their structural elements. So if you see, like, again, the exemptions that are in Chapter 372 for tangible, we carried those forward to the extent possible to the digital counterpart in this new excise tax. So for the educational, charitable, and religious exemptions, those carried forward for textbooks, for newspapers. All the exemptions that are Chapter 372 have been carried forward into this new excise tax on digital products.
And finally, is the 0.25% holdback, is that also consistent with the current sales and use tax?
You're referring to the 0.25% that can be retained by the taxpayer for the retailer that's collecting and remitting the tax. Yes, that's the 0.25% is what a retailer for tangible personal property is allowed to retain for collecting and remitting the tax to the Department of Taxation.
Okay. And then I think so. I have a question on Section 106. It's probably going to be answered the same way as the one regarding the business. Mr. Gannon, on page 38, every seller, every retailer, and every person storing, using, or otherwise consuming in the state specified digital projects purchased from a retailer shall keep records, receipts, invoices. What's going on there? The way it reads makes it sound like I need to keep full records of every streaming service I subscribe to for the department.
Excuse me, sir, I missed the section reference at the very beginning.
106.
106. So section 106 is equivalent to NRS 372.735. So that in terms of that section exists. And for the tangible personal property sales tax, that the Department of Taxation has that requirement for the sale and a seller or retailer for tangible personal property. So then we're carrying that construct over into the digital products excise tax. And I will be honest with you, when you read some of these under the digital construct, it's hard for me sometimes to get my mind around because you're so used to living in the tangible counterpart than to then read the words in the digital. But that's what we felt when we were bringing this forward is bringing the Chapter 372 provisions that taxation uses to administer the tangible tax, to have those in place for this excise tax on digital products. And clearly then it will be the Department of Taxation will take these provisions and administer them in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I read that section and it makes it look like I as an individual have to, if I'm using or consuming any of the digital products purchased from a retailer, I'll have to keep records, receipts, invoices, and other pertinent papers in such a form as the department may require. But I mean, it can't be right. Right?
No, that's not the intent, but I see what you're saying when you see the way it's written with the commas.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Great question, Senator Kieckhofer. Other members of the committee? All right. It looks like that is the end of questions. So we're going to go ahead and open public testimony for SB 346. BPS, if you could help us out with opening the line for support, we will limit comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ratty. If you would like to speak in support of SB 346, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, if you would like to speak in support of SB 346, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 666. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N, last name Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y. calling in support of SB 346 today on behalf of the Urban Consortium, which is made up of the cities of Las Vegas, Henderson, Reno, and Sparks. I want to thank Senator Neal for taking the time. She spent countless hours working with us on this idea and this concept, and especially for taking on this critical issue of tax erosion. The new technology and all the other developments in the last few years are how they're impacting our tax structures. And I think, Madam Chair, or Vice Chair, excuse me, we've advocated along with the League of Cities for a larger study of all the tax revenues in the state of Nevada, similar to what we did back in the late 80s with the Price Waterhouse study. I think this further points to the need to do that. But this is certainly a step, a solution that moves us in the right direction. So on behalf of the consortium, we want to throw our support behind SB 346 and thank Chair Neal for her critical work. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dennis, I need to step out for just a minute, so if you could take over, and then BPS, if you could keep us going under support with a limit of 2 minutes.
Sure, thank you. So we'll go to the next
Chair,
caller.
I'll proceed. Caller with the last 3 digits, 486. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may proceed.
Hi, good afternoon. Alexander Marks, M-A-R-K-S, with the Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA supports SB 346 to establish parity for the digital version of products subject to sales tax. At the beginning of this legislative session, hundreds of educators in red scarves and face coverings were back in Carson City, lining both sides of the street from the legislative building to the Capitol to bring attention to education funding. After sustaining difficult cuts last summer, K-12 public education is threatened with more devastating hits. Early literacy supports a proposed a $33 million cut in the next biennium, and $156 million in cuts to class size reductions means more overcrowded classes, even with the largest class sizes in the nation now. While federal funding from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan will certainly help Nevada weather this crisis over the next couple of years, we know Nevada faces a chronic funding shortage. In public education, Nevada consistently ranks near the bottom of states in per pupil funding. That is why we've been asking legislators to be brave, be bold, and secure new revenue. The emerging economy increasingly moving to digital format has created a loophole in sales tax, which is only applied to the purchase of physical products. We know technology companies are minting new millionaires each day, oftentimes disrupting industries and exploiting these types of tax loopholes. At the same time, we know sales tax is one of the main revenue streams for K-12 public ed. Educators have been calling on our leaders to invest in Nevada for years, and now is the time to take bold steps to meet our state's needs. We need our leaders to have the courage to stand up and demand new and progressive revenue to move Nevada from the bottom of the education funding lists. We believe our legislature has the opportunity this session to advance a package of revenue proposals, including SB 346, to take a big and bold step in addressing our funding challenge. Thank you.
Let's go on to the next one.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 874. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Garcia, REBECCA-GARCIA, President of the Nevada Parent-Teacher Association. Nevada PTA's mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. This year has shown a light on the essential role schools play not only in the education of our children, but the fabric of our communities. Nevada schools have been chronically underfunded for decades. For too long, our class sizes have led the nation, and our funding has been at the bottom. As a mother of 4 and SOT chair for many years, I have seen the impact of meager school budgets directly on students and classrooms. My daughter returned to her 4th grade classroom today. They had to move to a larger room to accommodate the 33 students in her class. In Nevada, we think that this is normal, but it doesn't have to be our reality. SB 346 is one step forward this legislature can take to provide additional funding for our schools. Nevada PTA is in support of this legislation. In 2019, the Nevada Legislature, after more than 5 decades, started the process of updating the education funding formula with SB 543. A new funding formula and the critical efforts of the Commission on School Funding provide progress towards addressing historical challenges. Yet the reality is, without additional revenue to increase increase education funding, the new formula will simply redistribute inadequate funding without improving our education system. Nevada needs to move out of the past and ensure parity in digital goods. When was the last time you purchased a DVD or CD or even a book? We cannot afford to lose this revenue that could be used to improve our schools. Nevada school funding relies heavily on local school support taxes collected, and we know that additional funds are needed. Federal relief coming to our state is desperately needed, but is only a short-term Band-Aid, not a sustainable long-term solution. Now is the time to plan and implement legislation that will provide for our students and the future of our state. We need to invest in the health and well-being of Nevada's children and families, and this requires resources. Nevada needs strong, stable, and diverse mix of revenue that will effectively meet the needs of our state, not just today, but in 5, 10, and 20 years. We urge your support for this legislation to close the sales tax loophole, increase funds for our schools, and help prepare Nevada for a stronger future. Thank you to Senator Neal for the hard work on this effort, and thank you to the committee for supporting this bill.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 338. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Senator Dennis and members of the committee. This is Priscilla Maloney, PriscillaMaloney, representing the AFSCME 4041 retirees this afternoon. The retirees are very much in support of SB 346, and we thank Senator Neal for bringing forth this bill. And as Mr. Hardy had referenced, all the hundreds, I'm sure, of hours she has done to get us to the place where we have a bill that we can all get behind. Nevada has had poorly funded education and health care prior to the pandemic, and just this morning I spent my own personal time representing the AFSCME retirees in a budget hearing where millions of dollars were cut from the state health care system because of, yet again, budget shortfalls in the state budget. Nevada would join 28 other states and 62 counties that have already adopted some type of taxation on digital products. And over time, this transition to digital products that are not subject to sales tax will reduce the amount of sales tax dollars coming into the state budget, and in turn, education and hopefully the state workforce budgets as well. So the AFSCME retirees, again, thanks the committee for listening to this bill. Thanks Senator Neal for bringing it forward, and hope that we can get this bill moving down the road where it needs to be to the Senate floor soon. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 419. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Benjamin Chalman. That's BenjaminChallinor, and I am representing Faith in Action in Nevada. And we are here in support of SB 346, and would like to thank Senator Neal for bringing this bill. I would first like to echo the sentiments of the previous speakers. Every time there's an economic downturn, we seem to always cut education, healthcare, and mental health. This bill will make sure that we're able to at least bring some stability and make sure that we're not making as much cuts, providing more stability to our local government, and making sure that we are able to provide more to our education. Nevada needs new streams of revenue to help our economy recover, especially after our previous, especially due to COVID. And we also need to adapt our tax policies by including digital goods, and will provide additional help for our communities. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Have a good, and we urge your support.
Thank you, caller. And I'll just remind callers that we do have 3 bills to hear today. So if somebody has said something similar and you can just say ditto or I agree, feel free to keep your remarks short.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 863. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. This is Dagny Stapleton, D-A-G-N-Y-S-T-A-P-L-E-T-O-N. I'm the Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. And on behalf of Nevada's counties, we are happy to support SB 346 as it would capture revenue from the growing share of digital products that are currently not contributing to Nevada's sales tax structure and create equity for those types of goods. Nevada's counties, through the C-Tax formula, receive a distribution of sales taxes, and so, as you heard, would receive additional revenue if SB 346 were passed. We'd like to note that for many of Nevada's counties, sales taxes are their primary or secondary source of revenue. So these revenues and additions to it are very important and very welcome to counties. Collecting sales taxes from digital goods could be an important contribution to assist counties with the many critical services that they provide to Nevadans, including services to our most vulnerable, our local justice system, emergency response, roads, parks, pools, libraries, and of course our local election systems. We also really want to thank the Chair Neal, for working with us along the way on this bill and its different iterations and how those impacted counties. We are appreciative of that and thank the committee for the opportunity to provide comment.
Caller with the last three digits, 964. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Or I'm sorry, it's Madam Chairwoman now. For the record, Mary Walker, M-A-R-Y-W-A-L-K-E-R, representing Carson City and Lyon County, and we rise in support of SB 346. It's equitable, it's shared burden, and it'll help stop the tax erosion caused by changing technology. I want to thank Senator Neal very much for bringing this bill forward, and thank you, Madam Chairman. Hope everyone's doing well.
Caller with the last three digits, 849. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Chair Neal, Vice Chair Ratty, and members of the committee, my name is Jen Blackhurst, Jenn-Blackhurst, and I am testifying on behalf of Hope for Nevada, a nonprofit public education advocacy organization with over 1,000 members. We would like to express our strong support of SB 346. A discussion on Nevada's tax structure is the most important conversation that needs to happen this session. While mining has garnered the most recent attention in the media, we know that adjusting that tax alone will not yield enough and is not specifically designated to support public education. If we are going to stabilize Nevada's economy, we need to look to multiple revenue sources. So we thank Senator Neal for bringing this bill for consideration. Our safety net of one-time federal funds will end. Implementing this bill now will provide us with much-needed revenue at a critical time. Waiting for the next session to start addressing our shortfall is not an option we should even consider. Last session, the legislature took the first step in modernizing Nevada's education funding by passing the pupil-centered funding plan. We ask that you show that same commitment this session by modernizing our sales tax. This tax is one step towards providing necessary funds to implement this new plan as intended. We are in support of this legislation because, one, it goes directly to the existing local school support tax. It broadens our sales tax base, which aligns with recommendations from the Commission on School Funding. It brings more stability to our revenue system. It actually makes our sales tax less regressive, as it doesn't disproportionately affect those who can least afford it. And once passed, we can start accumulating much-needed revenue within 6 months. Supporting SB 346 shows that you prioritize Nevada's children and is an act of true leadership. And on their behalf, we thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 397. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 397. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good
afternoon, Chair Neal and members of the committee. My name is Michelle Booth, MICHELLEBOOTH, representing Educate Nevada Now. We are testifying in support of SB 346 because Nevada is in desperate need of solutions to address its grossly underfunded public education system. Even before the pandemic, Nevada students faced significant obstacles, including the largest class sizes in the nation. The link between education funding and student outcome is well established. A wide-ranging study by the Learning Policy Institute found that states cannot reliably improve student outcomes without long-term investments. The federal dollars expected to help lift the state out of the current crisis are only temporary resources. Nevada schools will face an enormous cliff as these funds expire, meaning any gains achieved with this historic federal investment will likely be lost. ENN supports long, stable revenue solutions like SB 346 that create a path toward a quality education system. Thank you, Senator Neal, for bringing this bill forward and for seeking solutions to address the needs of our state.
Caller with the last three digits, 026. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
For the record, my name is Andrea Cole, ANDREACOLE. I'm a mom, a former CCSD special education teacher, and I've served as co-chair on the SOT team at my son's school. Due to the budget cuts I saw in my SOT just a few years ago, I founded CCSD Parents, which is now an online community of over 14,000 Nevadans who care about education. I support SB 346 because Nevada school funding relies heavily on revenue generated by the local school support tax. SB 346 provides parity in sales tax to ensure digital sales will support our schools. We all know Nevada education has funding issues, and we need a real solution, which is what SB 346 creates. My friends and family from out of state say they would never live in Nevada because of our schools. I think as Nevadans, we have become accustomed to the state of our public schools, and we forget that people in other states are offered a much better public education for their children because they value education enough to fund it. We will never be able to diversify our economy or diversify the quality of our residents if we don't start to make education a priority. This simply closes a loophole. I'm frustrated by tough decisions school organization teams have had to face year after year as to what to cut. Cutting one fourth-grade teacher raises class sizes by 8 kids per class. My son had 57 kids in his middle school class. 57. That is unacceptable. Please hear me clearly when I tell you I am a consistent voter and I am an education voter. It's the issue that is most important to me. It's the issue that I talk to my friends and family about. It's the issue that I use social media to discuss. Please pass SB 346 and show us that education is important to you as well. Do it for our kids and for all Nevadans. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 229. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jamie Rodriguez. That's spelled JamieRodriguez. I am the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County, and appreciating the very busy schedule you have ahead of you still. Just want to be on the record of supporting the bill and thank the sponsor for working with us through the different proposals for this bill. We think bringing parity to our tax structure in the state is a good thing to move forward, and appreciate, again, the bill sponsor working with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And great example of how you can make the remarks in less than 2 minutes. So folks, follow along with that example because we do need to move this along.
Caller with the last three digits, 413. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Dylan O'Neill, DYLANO''NEILL, and I'm a senior state policy analyst with the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, or ITEP. We are in support of SB 346 because it would advance important tax policy principles to help the people and the economy of Nevada. Firstly, for the sake of adequately and stably funding public services, consumption tax bases should be broad for reasons that have already been covered today. I will add, though, that consumer spending is slow to recover when coming out of a recession, and when people not only reduce their consumption, but also shift it into untaxed sectors, as has happened with digital products during the current downturn, the impact on a state's budget is even larger and longer lasting, and the importance of a broad base is even more important. Second, from the perspective of horizontal equity and neutrality, unless there is a clear policy reason to favor a particular product, consumer, or business over another, a consumption tax really shouldn't do so. The fact that digital products are untaxed in Nevada while physical versions of essentially identical products are taxed has no such policy rationale and is largely a historical accident. And finally, Nevada's tax code is the fifth most regressive in the nation, with overall tax rates on low-income families that are 5 times higher than those paid by the richest 1%. Because lower-income families are more likely to lack internet access and thus less able to take advantage of the existing tax breaks for digital products, putting physical and digital products on an even footing will, in a small way, improve tax fairness as well. So again, we thank you for your time and encourage your support of SB 346.
All right, thank you. All right, so that's been 20 minutes of testimony and support. And while I hate to cut off public testimony on these bills, we really don't have any other choice as we get closer to the deadline week. So if you are on the line and are here to testify and support, please make sure to send an email to the committee. And if you do it by the end of the day, we will put it on to the public record so that we will still have your input. But at this time, I'm going to close public testimony in support of SB 346 and move to public testimony in opposition of SB 346. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes, and we'll do 20 minutes total.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ratty. If you would like to speak in opposition to SB 346, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to voice your opposition to SB 346, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Vice Chair Ratty. The lines are open. However, there are no callers wishing to speak in opposition to SB 346 at this time.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move to neutral.
Excuse me, I did just get... I believe these are for neutral. Never mind. If you would like to speak in neutral testimony to SB 346, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, if you would like to speak in neutral testimony to SB 346, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 407. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Broadcast Center. Thank you, Senator Ratty. For the record, this is Randy Thompson, RANDI-THOMPSON, State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business, and I'm testifying today in neutral. While we have concerns with the bill, we are also very concerned that small businesses continually to be at a disadvantage when it comes to going to grassroots books and buying a book and having to pay sales tax, but downloading it on Amazon, there is no sales tax. So there are definitely small business implications here, and we support the elements that bring parity to our tax system. We are neutral, but we do thank Senator Neal for bringing this bill forward, and we look forward to working with her to maybe get into support. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 232. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Dazlich, D-A-Z-L-I-C-H. I'm the Director of Government Affairs with the Vegas Chamber. The Vegas Chamber is here today to testify in neutral. We just would like to, in the interest of time, thank the sponsor for bringing this bill forward, and thank the sponsor as well for the continued meetings with stakeholders and we look forward to continuing to work on this bill as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ratty. It appears there are no other callers wishing to give neutral testimony on SB 346 at this time.
All right, thank you. Senator Neal, any closing remarks?
I just want to thank the committee for hearing this bill. It's been a long journey since 2019. There was a lot of work done, and I appreciate the hearing, and I appreciate fiscal staff and Department of Taxation who pretty much were with me every step of the way, trying to make sure that we could craft policy that made sense and stabilizes the Nevada economy and modernizes our tax statutes and deals with tax erosion of tangible goods that are no longer operating in our base. And so thank you for the hearing and my colleagues for listening to this bill.
You bet. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the hearing on SB 364, and we're going to open the hearing on SB 367 and invite Senator Neal to the virtual dais.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have checked to see that you had your team with you.
Yeah, so for the LET, it's just going to be me. It's going to be quick.
Okay, great.
I'm going to share a screen, I hope. Okay, so LET, why did I bring this bill? It's been an issue. We haven't had an LET discussion since 2015 when we changed the statute. And so I put this chart up, and I'm only focused on where we have it in bold in the broadened part of the LET is because the pandemic showed us a lot. It showed us that our whole lives in Nevada and in Las Vegas changed dramatically. And when I thought about tax fairness, I thought about how I should really try to deal with this number. If you look at the LET, we saw a significant drop where basically in 2022, you can see that chart, we went down to where we expect to be in the hole. The forecast was 937%. Like, we weren't even at zero. We were beyond zero. LET tanked. And so I decided to bring a bill that would remove the exemption from sports teams, which grew in Nevada over a period of time. And I thought, okay, why not have them baked in while there's a recession? There's no activity. It would have an effective date of the 2022, and they could easily build this into their cost. Gaming pays it, so why not the major sports teams that were operating in the state, because it was growing. And so I just did a simple act of removing the exemption, and there was an amendment on Nellis which makes sure that it doesn't include amateur sports teams, and that it doesn't include the minor league teams who contacted me and said that, you know, part of our base are the local parents and families who come to our games in Reno or come to our games in Las Vegas. And this is not the tourist dollar that you are seeking to build the base. And so once again, I was attempting with SB 367 to not only broaden the base for the LET, but to focus on the fact that because we took such a severe hit in a negative 93% in the LET, was to capture other entities that were going to be a part of the LET and entertainment that's happening, because it's a real thing. So the bill is super simple. I took away the exemption. There was a conversation in Section 1 where you see I believe in Section 1, where you see the drop off from the 7,500 to the 5,000. that was a conversation that I had, I believe, with Department of Tax, that could be a minor change that could happen to try to pick up entities that were at the 5,000 below the above the $5,000 5,000 person threshold, because it seemed like a lot of the nonprofit events that were going on, they never made it to the 7,500. And so that's what the bill does. It does two things: took away the exemption, which is the strikeout that you see in section 1 sub O, and that was my reasoning. I know that a lot of people were just like, why are you tampering with the LET? But the reason why I was tampering with the LET is because when I saw the economic forecast and I saw that number, I was just like, we're at ground zero. And the best time to make revenue change is when you're at ground zero. And I thought it was fair because gaming pays it, they've been paying it. And so why not the large sports teams? There was an argument that came up, well, you guys passed the Raiders, and they have a contract which says that they cannot have a specific tax, targeted tax. It says a targeted tax towards them. And the conversation that, pretty much my thoughts towards that was, number one, LET is not a targeted tax. It's a removal of an exemption. Number two, there is no contract that can be written, as far as I know, that can tell the legislature what to do. Our power is plenary, so you can write it in. It's an illegal term. There is no way that you will be able to activate that term to then say, well, I wrote a contract that told the legislative body what you shall not do. I found it interesting that that term even existed or was adopted, but it is inaccurate to believe that there is any legal place or standing for that contract term in the state of Nevada, where you would then elicit a suit to say, well, I told the legislature that they shouldn't do this to me. Well, you're probably going to lose that fight because we are plenary and the legislature establishes the law of the state. And if we change contract terms, that is our power. It is not a power of a business. And so those were some of the pushbacks that I got, but I said, okay, I'll take my chances. I know the reason why I'm bringing this bill. I'm bringing it because of the loss, significant loss that the state encountered. And with that, I will open myself up for questions and stop sharing.
Senator Dancer.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And so the amendment talks about minor teams and amateur sports, or leagues. But if they're the same sport, how do you differentiate if it's the same type of activity, but one is a higher level, maybe professional versus like a minor league?
So thank you for the question, because it's a conceptual amendment. The idea was to go after I know that amateur teams are considered professional, but the request was to delineate between the amateur versus an NFL or the WNBA. And so I would have to put some more sentences in that conceptual amendment to delineate what I'm exactly going after. But that was a request, and I understood their plea, and I understood why they wanted to be separated out. And so that is the conversation. But the conversation clearly would probably be on the size or the revenue that I may consider what that looks like. I have to talk to legal about how I would craft that delineation. But that was the intent, and that's the goal, is to separate amateur, which is considered professional, from the big leagues.
Thank you. And I think that might be sort of the heart of it, is if it's the same type of sport, how do you, one's taxed and what's not, but it's the same activity, but a different portion of the league maybe. So thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any additional questions from members? Senator Kekeffer?
I'm going to just go jump on in, even though I'm not getting called on. That's okay. So there are different leagues that sometimes maybe may have like different status, right? So in professional soccer, there's Major League Soccer. We don't have a Major League Soccer team, but we do have professional soccer teams. They're not necessarily considered minor leagues, although they may be affiliated with Major League Soccer teams. How do you envision addressing the different tiers within? I think it was something similar to what Senator Gasser was getting at.
So that's a really good question. It's something that I need to flesh out in regards to how to carve it out. But it seems like the best way to do that is either based on size or revenue. But so it was my understanding that there may be some minor league soccer or amateur, but not the level of WNBA. And so that's something to think about, how to carve that out. It's a question I don't have answered because I just accepted that amendment yesterday. And so it's something I need to think through. I wanted to just have the hearing on the general policy and why I thought removing the exemption was important, the fairness that I was going after, and why I felt the major professional sports team should be on the equal playing field with gaming and pay the LAT.
So I mean, so the way I read it, right, is that I guess would the lights, Las Vegas Lights FC, be taxed or not under this proposal?
Las Vegas Lights are a what?
Soccer team.
Soccer? No.
It wouldn't be.
I mean, I know they have like significant games, but I didn't envision in capturing them because I considered that amateur. That's not amateur?
No, it's professional. I think. I mean, it is, but what I'm saying is it's not MLS, right? So it's another league. We may have affiliations with MLS teams, but so I don't think they'd necessarily be considered minor league. So that's what I was getting at. So I mean, if they're not included, the way I would read it is really this is covering the Golden Knights, the Raiders, and the Las Vegas Aces, right?
Yes.
Those three teams. And maybe special events.
Yeah.
For professional.
You're breaking. You're going in and out, Senator Kekeffer.
It's actually my thought process. It's not my voice. That's.
Oh.
We did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Dennis?
Just a question. So why do we have the exemptions there?
So I went and looked in the legislative history and I couldn't find out why the exemption was there. Actually, it seemed to be when I went back looking at 2015. And then prior to that, it seemed that this was an agreement behind closed doors to create this exemption, but there wasn't actually legislative minutes or statements that spoke to it. That's where when I looked at this, I started there first to try to understand why it existed. And what groups told me when they saw this drop out was that they believed that it was there to promote bringing teams here, that having that exemption would allow, I guess, to a carrot on the stick to bring the sports teams here. I had no idea that was going on because I was a member of Assembly Taxation in 2015. Marilyn Kirkpatrick was the chair. I remember the LET bill because I think it was Liberelli who worked with now Commissioner Kirkpatrick, who worked on this bill, and we had a lot of conversations around the LET. And I didn't remember that we specifically carved that out, and I didn't find any minutes that reflected it, but that is what I heard from groups, but there are no legislative minutes that reflect those comments.
So, and I would probably agree that, it's probably an incentive because we had no teams here and we wanted teams to come. My concern is how many other states tax their professional teams?
That is a good question because I believe a lot of them do. But I will find that data and send it to you. I think that we are unique with providing that exemption. But there are a lot of states that do a lot of things that Nevada clearly doesn't want to put its toe in or chooses not to do. I knew this bill would, make people feel some kind of way, but I also felt that the fair play argument was much greater because the question that I asked myself was, well, why should gaming pay it? Especially in Clark County, where we have, from the data from when this bill came out, we were talking about 32 million visitors a year, roughly. And on a low year, we could be talking about 28 million visitors a year coming to Vegas. So when the economy opens back up, the thought in my mind was, why not broaden the space so we don't see looking at 937% drop in the LET and create some fair play there that's happening in Clark County. I know it affects Washoe, but there's also gaming in Reno. And I just felt like, yeah, I understand the carrot, but they're here. And I couldn't figure out what would be the legal argument for someone not to pay the live entertainment tax and you're performing live entertainment. And tourists are coming through Vegas in stark numbers. And when we open up, I can guarantee that Vegas is probably going to boom. It's bustling now, and we're at 50%. And, because I see the Strip and I see what's happening at 50%. And I just, in my mind, I wanted to at least make the argument. I knew that people would probably disagree, but I wanted to make the argument that this was fair play. Gaming has always paid it. You have other players in the market who are associated with drawing large numbers of people, and yet they're exempt. Why? And I didn't see a legal reason for why they should not be.
And I don't disagree necessarily in that premise, except that the difference is the gaming is a long-established part of our economy, and professional sports is something that we're trying to establish. We still don't have an NBA team. We still don't have an MLS team, and we have to compete against other cities. And so my concern is that we're kind of young in this particular type of expansion into our economy. And I'm just wondering if this would be a disincentive to try to attract other teams, because we want to expand our economy from just gaming to other things. I'm wondering, what the thought process on that is.
So the thought process on that was, and I've thought about that. The question is, how do you want to incentivize people to come? If you don't put them in now when there's a recession and no activity, I can guarantee 5 years from now, they're not going to willingly walk themselves into a tax base when they're making millions. And then they say, I get the ticket sales. There is no tax that comes to the state of Nevada. And I feel like the argument that we make is if you have an event, a major event, let's say we get a major male basketball team. So then that brings in 40 million visitors to the state of Nevada. Those 40 million visitors use our roads, our services, our medical, everything. And then we're just going to say, well, because we want to incentivize them, we're not going to get, I know we're getting other revenue, but gaming has that same situation, but we don't let gaming off the hook at all for whoever they draw in. So why is it that a sports team should get that benefit? And I didn't have the legal position to hear this debated in committee when LET came about in 2015 with the major changes and overhaul that happened. And so I just think that, because incentives, we use incentives to bring people in, but I feel like sometimes we hurt ourselves because they never want to give it up. They never want to walk backwards and say, okay, thank you for the help. Thank you for letting us establish ourselves. But I still want to keep my exemption and never give anything back to the state. I don't see that as fair long term. And I've also seen how the abatements are working where we exempt taxes in other spaces. And I don't know any of those companies that want to give it back. They want to keep it forever.
Thank you, Senator Neal. I'm going to need to lean in here and interrupt, so I apologize, Senator Dennis. So Senator Kekeffer and I need to hop on over to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee because we have a work session that we need to get done today. So I'm going to ask Senator Dennis to chair Red as we move through the rest of this. And if we're able to make it back, we will. Thank you for the discretion as we're in deadline week and need to hop over to another committee. So appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. So any other questions from members? Switch to the right view. Anybody? Now that I can see everybody. I'm not seeing anybody. So we could probably move on to those that would be speaking in support. So if we could have those that are speaking in support.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. If you would like to speak in support of SB 367, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, to speak in support of SB 367, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 927. Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, committee chairperson Dennis and committee members. My name is Hava Ahmed, Hawah Ahmad, and I'm here representing the Clark County Education Association. The Clark County Education Association is the official bargaining partner for the Clark County School District, and we represent more than 18,000 licensed individuals. We are here testifying in support of this bill. The live entertainment tax should be extended in this fashion to provide a more diverse and expanded revenue base for us to be able to collect their tax revenue. There is no secret that we support funding SB 543 optimally, and we do need to get creative when it comes to our tax system. In addition to our support on this, we do want to mention to this committee that, when it comes to our taxes, we have to make sure that we look at everything holistically, and this is only one portion. We look forward to working with the sponsor of this bill and all of the stakeholders to ensure that when we look at taxes, we make sure that we all compromise a little bit to put our students first. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 499. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
This is Carter Bundy, registered lobbyist for AFSCME, CARTERBUNDY. We want to thank the sponsor for bringing this. One of the key elements of a good tax code is fairness. And as we've heard, there is a real disparity between some groups paying their LEP and some being exempted. The more of these exemptions that we can close, the fairer it'll be for everyone. And Nevada is just about last in the country in revenue per capita. So this is something that is desperately needed, not just for education in K-12, but for higher ed, for public safety, for healthcare, for infrastructure. We strongly encourage you to support 367 and thank the sponsor.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 130. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. I'm the Policy Director with Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Senate Bill 367. We want to thank the Senator for bringing this bill forward. As a state, we need to stop prioritizing corporations over Nevadans. By removing these exemptions, we can ensure Nevada's newest teams are giving back to the state in this moment of crisis, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. It appears there are no other callers wishing to speak in support of SB 367.
Okay, so let's go then to those who are speaking in opposition.
Callers, if you would like to speak in opposition to SB 367, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, that is star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 834. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 834. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Good afternoon to the members of the Senate Revenue Committee. For the record, my name is Mark Badane, spelled M-A-R-C-B-A-D-A-I-N. I am the president of the Las Vegas Raiders, here today in opposition to SB 367. First, I want to thank the entire legislature for making our move to Nevada possible. More than 12,000 workers were employed on Allegiant Stadium, and we finished construction on time and on budget. In addition to Raiders games, Allegiant Stadium will host UNLV games, concerts, and eventually a Super Bowl. Every hot dog, soda, T-shirt sold at these events generates tax revenue. Every hotel room occupied by visitors to these events generates room tax revenue. Thousands of jobs are created because of this stadium and will continue to be employed when the stadium is in operation. We've also generated over $1 million for charitable causes in Nevada through the sale of state-sponsored Raiders license plates by the Raiders Foundation. And we're opposed to this bill for several reasons. Before committing to Las Vegas, we discussed Nevada's lack of any ticket tax on professional sports teams as a specifically negotiated part of the financing structure that brought the team to Las Vegas. Changing the terms of such a negotiated deal before any fans have even attended a game at the stadium is not the spirit of the partnership that brought the team to Nevada. We would love to see the day when the NBA decides to join the WNBA's Aces, or when MLS joins the NFL and NHL here in Las Vegas. Imposing the LET on Nevada-based teams will be viewed as a negative for leagues and teams comparing markets when they contemplate relocation or expansion. We are extremely proud to be the Las Vegas Raiders, and we look forward to welcoming all of you and all Nevadans to Raiders games and all the other events that will host the Allegiant Stadium. Thank you for the opportunity to address the group today.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 288. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 288. Please state and spell your name for the record. If you're having difficulty unmuting yourself, you may press star 6. Once you've achieved that, you may begin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, Chairperson, and members of the committee. My name is Chip Siegel, S-E-I-G-E-L, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer of the Vegas Golden Knights, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to speak to you on the impact on the Vegas Golden Knights of the removal of this exemption. Nearly 70% of the Vegas Golden Knights revenue is from ticket sales. Las Vegas is a relatively small local media market, which means less revenue from TV and radio broadcasts. We're the 39th largest media market. The NHL in general average percentage of revenue from ticket sales is 60 to 65%, which is still high as compared to other professional sports who gain revenue from broadcasts. The Vegas Golden Knight ticket sales are overwhelmingly to local buyers, and this tax will ultimately hurt these local fans. This is not tourists that are generally going to the games. These are locals. Also, there was talk of the impact of the pandemic. Well, COVID and the restrictions on large gatherings have exacerbated the situation because of the heavy reliance on ticket sales. There's been no revenue from ticket sales to us at all. And as to the minor leagues, of course, we heard now that there's going to be a carve-out, but if you then carve out the minor leagues, this is a targeted tax because it's targeted to only a couple of potential taxpayers. There was also mention of the deterrent effect on other professional sports. That is one of the reasons it was a consideration when Vegas chose I mean, when the Golden Knights chose Vegas as the place they wanted to come, that was one of the conditions that they were relying on, and that is that there was no tax on that. And it will be a deterrent effect for NBA, MLB, MSL, et cetera, who will consider this excise tax when they're making their decisions. Other markets who have a similar tax, they use it for new builds or renovations that were paid for with public funds. The T-Mobile Arena, where Vegas Golden Knights play, was paid for with no public money. In conclusion, the removal of this exemption has a disparate impact on the Vegas Golden Knights, who have contributed millions of dollars to this local economy and have been a very, very good corporate citizen. Therefore, we respectfully oppose SB 367, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. It appears there are no other callers wishing to give opposition to SB 367 at this time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to neutral. Those wishing to give comments in neutral.
To enter the queue to give neutral testimony on SB 367, please press star 9 now. Once more, to voice neutral testimony for SB 367, please press star 9 now. Thank you, Senator Dennis. It appears there are no callers wishing to give neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, all right. So sounds like we're done with testimony. Chair Neal, closing comments?
Thanks to the committee for hearing the bill. I know that this is a controversial removal of the exemption. Just wanted to reiterate that my goal was to at least, number one, highlight the loss in revenue, the 937% number that was out there from the Economic Forum. Make the fair play argument that if gaming pays it, then why not everyone else? Gaming employs over hundreds of people, thousands, and so, but they shoulder it and they carry it, and so I wanted to make that statement out there that, you know, if you're out and operating in Nevada, that there is fair play. Gaming didn't get any abatements. They also didn't get any exemptions to start. What they got was they got an argument about fair taxes and fair policy, and they have shouldered that burden. And I think in the future, the committee needs to think about this. And as a state, we need to think about our revenue structure and how it works and what are our needs in order to fund the over 2 million people that now exist in Nevada. So thank you for the hearing.
Thank you. So with that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on SB 367, and we're going to open the hearing on SB 389, which establishes provisions governing peer-to-peer car sharing programs.
Thank you for that. I want to see if who else is on. There were some other people that were going to be on from, I don't see them on. So I'll just go through the bill. All right. So SB 389 is peer-to-peer car sharing. When I first got introduced to this concept, I was at a national local sales tax meeting called SALT with NCSL, and I thought they were joking that peer-to-peer existed. But literally, we have grown in significant ways, and our economy has grown in significant ways. So I call it like the Airbnb of cars, even though that's not its formal name. But basically, peer-to-peer allows someone who has a personal vehicle to rent it to a stranger through a platform. This bill is the work of several stakeholders to come to an agreement about what should be the tax structure that is associated with peer-to-peer platform. There is an amendment it should be on Nellis. And so I'll quickly go through the bill because I know we don't have a lot of time. But basically, in Section 1, it amends Title 43 governing public safety of vehicles, and places in this a new chapter to consist of the provisions in this bill. Section 3 and 4 are deleted by the amendment. Section 5 defines a car sharing program agreement as an agreement entered into between peer-to-peer sharing program and a shared vehicle driver or shared vehicle owner, which establishes the terms and conditions governing the shared vehicle. Section 6 and 7, deleted by amendment. Section 7.5 defines passenger car as having the meaning described in 482.087. Passenger car is anything carrying 10 persons or less, except a motorcycle, electric bike, electric scooter. Section 8 then defines a peer-to-peer sharing program, which is a platform that connects owners of shared vehicles with a shared driver to enable sharing of vehicles in exchange for money. Section 9 defines a shared vehicle. Section 10 defines a shared driver. Section 10.3 in subsection A, basically, this is where the taxing provisions comes in. So this was an agreement with the peer-to-peer platform that they would take on some of the burdens that a car rental company has. And so there is a GST, government service tax of 10% that will be applied to the shared vehicle that was shared on the vehicle driver. The reason why that was placed in there is because there are elements of acting like a car rental company, except for you're not a car rental company. You're a peer-to-peer platform, and the car is a personal car that is then being used. The policy that's driving the other parts of this are on the assembly side. I was only handling the taxation portions of this. And so if you continue to read in subsection 2 of 10.3, it says that the fees due from peer-to-peer car sharing program to the Department of Taxation are due on the last day of the calendar year. It talks about how, what should be filed with the Department of Taxation, the form, how it should be remitted. And subsection 3 of 10.3, it talks about, how if a contract is made pursuant to 244A, the Department of Taxation shall deposit money received from the peer-to-peer car sharing program. And so there was a conversation around whether or not, there should be sales tax associated with it, but there won't be sales tax unless the peer-to-peer platform, it has a car that has never paid sales tax before, and they start to have their own cars, which they then put on the platform. And so what is the agreement is that the peer-to-peer platform will do an MOU with the Department of Tax to collect that remittance of the tax. If in the rare circumstance that happens, then they will submit the sales tax. So in section, I'm just going to skip to sections 11 through 30 were deleted by amendment. So I'm going to jump to section 31, which amends NRS 482. And this is where it basically establishes that the short-term lessor, they'll secure a license, bonding, pay a license fee of $125, and go through a formalized process of establishing themselves within NRS 482. In section 31.1, we have an amendment. It amends the section 423.313, which basically says that upon the lease of a passenger car or short-term lessor in the state, the short-term lessor shall charge and collect from the short-term lessee. And then the bill makes some other conforming changes, and I will stop it there and then just go ahead and open myself up to questions, because the majority of the bill focuses on trying to establish a tax construct around peer-to-peer platforms where they are paying taxes into Nevada for operating as a peer-to-peer platform where they have a car sharing agreement. So with that being said, Senator Dennis, I will open myself up for questions.
I noticed you had, I don't know
if they got on. Let me see.
Is Mr. Alonso part of your, I just
Yeah.
noticed his name.
Oh, okay.
You want him to go?
Yes, please.
Mr. Alonso, you have comments?
Thank you. Is it Vice Chair Dennis? Sorry, I just came over. I was over in Assembly Growth and Infrastructure on the policy bill, the companion piece that Senator Neal referred to. And I just wanted to say I appreciate Senator Neal bringing this bill. There is the policy on peer-to-peer car sharing that's being heard now.
I can't remember if you said it at the very beginning because you went through a little thing, but make sure you identify yourself for the record.
I'm sorry, I'm Michael Alonso, and I'm here on behalf of Turo, Inc. And just, again, appreciate Senator Neal bringing this as we understand the language that we agreed to pay the GST and the two fees under 244A 810 and 244A 860. And I understand there's language in there that differentiates between a short-term lessor and a peer-to-peer car sharing platform, and a vehicle owner is defined. I just want to make sure that's all clear in the record. And as Senator Neal said, under Nevada law, if a person is purchasing something that's subject to sales or use tax and they choose to take an exemption because they're going to rent or lease that personal property, it goes beyond vehicles, then they have to take an election with the Department of Taxation, become a registered taxpayer, and start filing returns and then charging the sales tax on a transaction by transaction basis. We don't believe that any of our owners are going to avail themselves of that exemption, but if in the event that they do, we have agreed to the conceptual amendment on the memorandum of understanding with the Department of Taxation that we would collect that sales tax on the transaction by transaction basis and remit it to the state. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Senator Neal, is there anybody else that you were expecting?
Mr. Alonso, was there another person or no?
He's still over in Assembly Growth and Infrastructure. Again, Mike Alonso for the record. I'm sorry, Chair Neal. Wilson was supposed to be on here, but he's testifying right now in the other hearing.
So what I'll do, though, is I don't know if Director Young or Ms. Hughes wanted to talk about the MOU because it's the conceptual. It wasn't in the mock-up. Because I know there's probably a question on how that will work, but if you want to, then this is probably the time to kind of say it.
Thank you. This is Melanie Young, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation, and we will be in agreement with the MOU and working with the industry on collecting the sales tax on behalf of those that do not collect or do not pay the sales tax at the time the vehicle is purchased.
Thank you for that. And Senator Dennis, that is it, and we'll take questions.
All righty. So let's go to questions. Members, any questions? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. So I'm looking at the governmental service fee that's in 1A, and then it looks like it's defined what that's actually going to be in 7, so 10.3, because I was looking at 10.3 1A and then 10.3 7. So is the amount whatever's charged less the cost of fuel and the insurance? And I guess I'm trying to figure out what the 10% is exactly going to be charged against.
Mr. Alonso, do you want to take that one?
My understanding is that it would be charged against the cost of the, I guess for lack of a better term, we use sharing, but the cost of the rental minus those things.
was thinking. So if you rented a car and it cost $50, they would subtract off whatever the portion of insurance that went towards that, the portion of fuel, like their cost of goods. Is that?
That's my understanding.
Make sure you identify when you answer.
I'm sorry, Mike Alonso for the record.
Thank you.
So since you're sharing, and if you own a car 100% of the time, but you're sharing it 30% of the time, maybe they end up prorating it. I think it said it was reported quarterly. So you figure out what your income was, and then you charge against that income a portion of insurance and fuel and any other fees associated, I guess, and that the net amount is probably what you pay the fee on. Does that sound right?
Mike Alonso for the record, Senator, and may I go directly to her? I know, I'm sorry, I'm sitting on.
Yeah, go ahead, go straight. Let's go straight.
The platform is agreeing to collect and remit this. So this all happens through the app, and the platform on a transaction by transaction basis would charge the fee to the vehicle driver as outlined in the language, and then keep track of that. They have to keep records in the policy bill, plus all the records that are required under this mock-up, and they would remit that minus those. They're not charging the tax on those items that you mentioned that are in the bill. Those are not taxable.
Right. I guess it's not really clear in the bill if you pay $10 or say you pay $100 to share a car. If you're paying the fee will be on the $100. I don't think it actually is on the $100. I think it's on the $100 less whatever your cost of goods are, which you'll have. I think the owner of the car is going to have to figure that out.
Again, Mike Alonso for the record, the platform will actually figure that out. If it's $100 for the sharing of the vehicle or the rental fee, you would pay the tax on the $100. And I believe the language is in there just to set forth, because if there's fueling, which that would generally be between the driver and the owner. But I think from the statutory standpoint, the bill drafter put that in to make it clear that those things aren't taxable, and they mirror to a certain extent what's in the rental car statute already.
Oh, I think I'm understanding it better. So basically, if you're trying to share a car and it has to be delivered to you, or you're sharing a car and you have to put fuel into it, that's sort of settled between the person operating the car and that individual, but it's not part of what's charged as far as taxes.
That's correct. Mike Alonso for the record. And the insurance, for example, the insurance in the policy bill, the platform's required to provide to cover so that there are no gaps in insurance coverage. The base insurance is provided at no charge. But then the vehicle owner, for example, could increase those limits and pay additional fees. Those things would not be subject to the tax, but the fee that they're paying for the actual rental car would be subject to the tax.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question. So the individuals that do the actual that are sharing the cars, they're using an app to do that, right? But do they have to be licensed to do this?
Again, for the record, Michael Alonso, Senator Dennis, licensed. The peer-to-peer platform would be the entity under the policy bill that would be licensed with the DMV to act in this capacity. The driver and the owner would have to have, and again, this is under the policy, I think is being heard right now. They would have to have a driver's license. They would have to have vehicle insurance. They'd have to meet certain requirements to be on the platform as either a vehicle owner or a vehicle driver. But the platform itself would have to get file an application with the DMV, at least proposed under the Assembly Bill 429, have to file an application and be licensed by the DMV. And then the policy bill has all the insurance and consumer protection provisions in there along with that licensing and record keeping.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, doesn't look like it. Let's go then. We're going to go to those that wish to give testimony in support. So the testimony in support.
If you would like to give testimony in support of SB 389, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, to give support to SB 389, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 714. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 714. Please state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Neal and members of the committee. My name is John Van Arsdell. That's VANARSDELL. I'm the head of government relations for Avail. We are a peer-to-peer car sharing company that's actually part of the Allstate Insurance family of companies, and I'm here to support Senate Bill 389. At Avail, we are strong believers of living into a regulatory structure and paying our fair share of taxes to help promote this innovative transportation model that can help consumers in Nevada. We are very appreciative of the work that Chair Neal and the committee has been doing on this. We look forward to supporting you all through the legislative process and here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next caller.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. There are no other callers wishing to voice support for SB 389.
Okay, let's go then to those wishing to testify in opposition.
To voice opposition to SB 389, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue to voice opposition to SB 389. Thank you, Senator Dennis. There are no callers wishing to voice opposition at this time.
Okay, and then let's go to neutral. Those wishing to give testimony in neutral.
To voice neutral testimony on SB 389, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue to voice neutral opposition to SB 389. Caller with the last 3 digits, 949. Please state and spell your name for the record. If you're having difficulty unmuting yourself, press star 6. Otherwise, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Dennis, members of the committee. My name is Brian Rothery, B-R-I-A-N, Rothery, R-O-T-H-E-R-Y. I'm with Enterprise Holdings, which operates the Enterprise Alamo National Car Rental Companies. I wish to offer some comment on the bill. We're taking a neutral position at this time. I believed we were a stakeholder to this conversation, but this hearing leads me to believe that there was some discussion concerning the issue of sales tax that I certainly would have liked to offer some perspective on, and would like to offer just some basic comments related to that concept. Specifically, it was mentioned, that the extent to which hosts or vehicle owners either pay or don't pay sales tax at the time of purchase is a factual one that I think bears quite a bit on this debate. And, I'd just like to inject a little more sunlight into that topic. I think it would be a better piece of public policy if we had more information around the extent to which that's occurring. I think Mr. Alonso indicated in his testimony that he didn't believe that Turo vehicle owners were taking advantage of a tax break, and that's fair. There's more competitors out there in the space. If we're going to create public policy relating to sales tax, which presumes that they have paid sales tax, I think it would just be better informed by a piece of data that perhaps the state of Nevada could engage in, so that we could just sort of see if that really is the best way to handle it. Because I think you also have a choice which would make the opposite presumption, which would say we're going to presume that sales tax is owed on all of these transactions, and then allow owners who can prove that they paid sales tax to go
and demonstrate that they deserve some sort of credit or reimbursement. Factually speaking, the amount or the incidence of tax being paid or not, I think matters on this, and I think it would make a better public policy debate. And just to sort of offer a proof point, while I was here listening to the testimony, I just went out to search on the web to see, what sort of is out there on the internet related to the topic. There's a CPA that appears to be an expert on, it's called My Shared CPA, on sharing economy, and he says this specifically. It says, if your local government charges sales tax on rentals, you must pay sales tax on your earnings. However, if you're wondering if you will need to pay sales tax on a new vehicle that you purchase exclusively for business, then the answer is generally no. But that's the professional advice that's out there for folks that want to buy more than 1 or 2 or 3 cars. I think we ought to know that. We ought to know the extent to which it's happening. And I think just informing the debate with real data about how often that's happening, I think would make a better piece of public policy. And with that, I'll make myself available to questions.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller in neutral.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. That was the last caller to give neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and go back to Senator Neal. Any closing comments?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you for that. So the sales tax conversation, I want to talk about this because the sales tax conversation did happen. We heard the other side and we understand what they want, which is if the peer-to-peer platform start to engage in an activity where the car itself has not paid the sales tax. I know that the peer-to-peer platform was in agreement. They were going to do marketplace facilitator language. We could not put that in to the mock-up because if everybody remembers, when the bill first dropped out, number one, it dropped out with no taxes. So we've been going back and forth to make sure that the mock-up came out with all of the information. It was debated and the conversation with fiscal staff and tax staff about the fact that there are very rare circumstances where a personal vehicle, because these are personal vehicles, have not already paid the sales tax. And we were not going to tax a personal vehicle twice because typically that is remitted at the time of sale for that personal vehicle. But the car rental companies believe, and we did not throw away their beliefs, that if the peer-to-peer choose to at some point start to purchase their own vehicles, that then there would be the circumstance where then they would have to remit that sales tax. We agree with that. When the bill comes out with the conceptual amendment and the mock-up, it will reflect that conversation. It will not create a double taxation on a personal vehicle. That is not good policy. That is not something we should do to personal car owners who've already paid the sales tax and to tax their car twice. But in the circumstance where peer-to-peer starts to purchase their own, they will be a remitter of that sales tax on that car. And that is where they're acting as a marketplace facilitator to remit the sales tax or through the MOU as discussed. We are just working out the best pathway for them to do that in the language that reflects that behavior. So I want to make sure that interpretation of this hearing, although rushed, although pushed, is that conversation is not lost, but double taxation will not be the outcome of the language that you see, but there will be a provision that allows the peer-to-peer to remit sales tax if they purchase a vehicle that is not paid sales tax or a car gets on the platform that is a personal vehicle that has never paid sales tax. And that's a very rare circumstance in the latter. But thank you, committee, for this hearing on SB 89.
All right. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing. And I will turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Lot in the past 3 hours. Okay, so we will open ourselves up for public comment. If anyone signed in public comment, EPS.
Thank you, Chair Neal. If you would like to make public comment on today's meeting, please press star 9 now. To give public comment on today's meeting, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to give public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will go ahead and adjourn Senate revenue.